when the atmosphere reaches a certain amount of mana, an abyss will be born. The abyss connects to the demon realm and spawns monsters. These monsters have different levels, with the highest being level 12, and such individuals are called lords. One day, the hometown of the main character, Noel, was suddenly attacked by a lord-level monster. His grandfather, or rather, the strongest warrior of humanity, had to step in to fight to ensure everyone could escape safely. He put Noel in a shelter and told him to have confidence in his strength. However, after the battle ended, Noel went to look for him and was shocked to find his grandfather severely injured and near death. His grandfather found it ironic that, in the end, he could not resist the effects of aging, despite being praised by the world as the immortal. He wanted Noel to promise him that he would become someone even stronger than himself. Noel made that promise and was determined to become an adventurer like his grandfather. 12 years passed, and Noel had truly become an adventurer with his own party. However, Noel's class was only a spellcaster, considered the weakest class because he could only use magic to enhance others and needed teammates to support him in battle. Noel later informed his party that the monsters they were facing were a type of vampire and that they needed to eliminate the leader to stop them from functioning. Otherwise, they would reproduce infinitely. Walter, one of his comrades, wondered why they didn't target the leader from the start. Noel explained that the Abyss had a higher level than their rank, so they couldn't afford to be careless, and gradually eliminating the enemies was the best strategy. Suddenly, the leader appeared, releasing toxic gas that separated Noel from the others. The leader then attacked Noel's party, putting them in a difficult situation and forcing Noel to quickly devise a strategy. Noel took out an antidote to resist the poison and shot the leader once. He decided to show everyone how a spellcaster fights. He then cast spells and created a battle plan for the team. By commanding the team to fight, their abilities were enhanced. He also used a spell to boost both the physical strength and mana of the entire team. The girl, Tanya, was responsible for creating shields for the two frontline members, while those two would attack and restrain the monster. Suddenly, a group of smaller monsters approached Noel from behind. He told Tanya to focus on the two at the front while he handled the rear. Noel then took out his gun and fired a shot to freeze the monsters. This was a magic gun, a magical tool that spellcasters like him relied on in battle. Noel intentionally left one monster alive and had only one bullet left, so he turned and shot the leader, then enhanced the next attack of the two frontline members to make it powerful enough to finish off the monster. They launched their final strikes together and successfully defeated the leader. Noel was almost hit by the remaining small monster, but it stopped functioning just in time, making everyone think he was too reckless. After completing the mission, the group quickly left the Abyss to return. Noel had previously cried to his grandfather about having the weakest class, but his grandfather saw his potential and decided to train him well, hoping Noel would surpass him, the one considered the greatest adventurer. Upon returning to the adventurer's tavern, it was revealed that the capital city was the largest in the kingdom because it utilized the resources from the abysses and monsters for development. This also explained why the adventurer profession had grown and was highly sought after. Noel came to the capital to find teammates because his class couldn't fight alone. His first teammates were Walter, Tanya, and the team leader, Lloyd. Noel still wanted to recruit someone with scouting abilities, but for now, he would gain experience with this team because that was the first step toward achieving his ambition. Walter noticed Noel seemed annoyed about the recent haggling over the reward with the guild and commented that an adventurer should know how to be generous. Noel's grandfather once taught him that as an adventurer, one must also be obsessed with money because money allows you to acquire the best equipment. At the same time, he advised not to care about what others say, but it's best not to let oneself be looked down upon. However, Walter wanted Noel to stop being so greedy for money, as it could affect the team's reputation. Noel sarcastically retorted, angering Walter, who then challenged Noel to a fight. Walter insulted Noel's class, so Noel fired back, forcing Lloyd to step in and stop them before things escalated further. Afterward, the group divided the rewards, and Lloyd expressed hope that they would soon find more lucrative jobs like this to grow. But Noel pointed out that jobs this good were hard to come by because the best ones were all taken by large clans, leaving only leftovers for small parties like theirs. Even when clans didn't take certain jobs and pass them down, they still had to pay intermediary fees. Therefore, Noel proposed creating their own clan. If they didn't have enough money, he would cover the rest, believing that without establishing a clan soon, they would remain stagnant. He was confident he could manage it since he had learned a lot about running a clan. Noel also mentioned that although they were inexperienced, they were quite attractive, and since the capital was trying to make adventuring a popular profession, clan representatives needed to be appealing both in appearance and reputation. Walter agreed, acknowledging they couldn't stay like this forever. Noel bluntly stated that if Lloyd didn't agree, he would withdraw his share from the group's assets and leave the team. Lloyd reluctantly compromised and told Noel and Walter to meet the next day to discuss the matter further, suggesting they rest for now. Noel agreed and left. The next morning, Walter suddenly rushed over to inform Noel that both Tanya and Lloyd had betrayed them. Noel then learned that Tanya and Lloyd had made a failed investment, accumulating a huge debt, and had embezzled 12 million from the group's shared funds before fleeing. Upon hearing this, Noel laughed, unable to believe Lloyd was that kind of person. He asked Walter where he found the letter, and Walter said he had discovered it in Lloyd's in-room. However, Noel was curious why Walter had come so early since their meeting wasn't scheduled until noon. Walter explained that he had overheard a promising job at a tavern the night before and wanted to discuss it early to secure the opportunity before someone else did. But when he arrived, the room was empty, with only the letter left behind. The two then split up to investigate Tanya and Lloyd's whereabouts and discovered that the night before the city gates closed, the pair had sneaked out of the capital. Based on the timeline, more than half a day had already passed. Fortunately, they found out early because if they had waited until noon, it would have been too late. Now, they needed to figure out a solution. Noel decided to check the city exit records to determine which gate they had left through and their intended destination. Walter wondered how they would catch up, but Noel stated that if they used horses, they could overtake them, assuming Tanya and Lloyd were traveling on foot. However, Noel was concerned that even if they caught up, it would be pointless if they couldn't defeat them in a fight, as the two of them were weaker. Therefore, they needed another plan. The two went to the Adventurer's Tavern, where Noel issued a quest. He would pay 2 million to anyone who could capture the two traitors and bring them back. Immediately, a group accepted the quest and set out. Afterward, a man approached Noel, wanting to negotiate about the quest. He claimed to know where Lloyd and Tanya had gone and demanded a quest fee for the information. Noel bargained the reward down to 1 million, knowing the man's party couldn't handle Lloyd and Tanya, so he only needed the information and would go with them to capture the traitors. The man tried to negotiate for more, but, facing Noel's tough stance, reluctantly agreed to the 1 million deal. He then revealed that he had seen them leave through the south gate the previous night and suspected they were heading to a village in that direction. Hearing this, Noel told Walter to go ahead while he stayed behind to handle something important. Later, the group set out, and by that time, Lloyd and Tanya had already arrived at the village, planning to rest, confident that Noel would have given up and wouldn't pursue them. However, to their surprise, Noel suddenly appeared right behind them, with several people ambushing from around. As they tried to fight back, Noel's magic immobilized them, rendering them unable to move. Walter immediately began interrogating the two, but Noel stopped him. Noel understood Lloyd's situation, so he didn't bring up the debt. Instead, he asked about the reward money from their recent vampire quest. Lloyd claimed he had already used that money not for investments, but to pay off debts. However, Noel knew Lloyd was lying because there had never been any investment. In truth, Lloyd had gambled, lost, borrowed money from shady people, used the team's funds to cover his debts, and then fled. Noel's precise accusation left Lloyd speechless. When Lloyd tried to argue that he was under pressure as the team leader, Noel mercilessly beat him to a pulp, leaving him half dead. Tanya begged Noel for forgiveness, but Noel asked if she preferred to be beaten instead of Lloyd, as he believed in gender equality and spared no one. Using magic, he forced Tanya to confess. It turned out she had also gambled with Lloyd and realized her mistake too late. However, Noel didn't beat her. Instead, he sentenced her to 10 years of hard labor as punishment for embezzlement, unless she preferred prison. After wrapping things up, the man who had provided information approached Noel to claim his payment. Noel told him to wait a bit longer, but the man, fearing Noel might renege, tried to use force. In response, Noel delivered a single blow that knocked him unconscious. This was a self-defense technique Noel's grandfather had taught him, designed to temporarily paralyze the target, a basic skill for someone like Noel. The man's companions carried him away. Soon after, a carriage arrived, and from it stepped Finocchio, a slave trader whom Noel had invited. Noel intended to sell Lloyd and Tanya to recover the stolen money. Upon hearing this, both were shocked but powerless to resist. Finocchio inspected them and offered $6 million, but Noel found the price too low. Finocchio explained that the church had issued a decree against extravagant spending, preventing him from offering a higher price, as doing so would attract the church's attention. Curious about the church's influence, especially over someone as powerful as Finocchio, who controlled the capital's underworld, Noel reluctantly agreed but insisted on selling them for $11 million. Finocchio hastily agreed without fully processing the deal. Realizing he'd been tricked, Finocchio tried to negotiate, but the more he argued, the higher Noel raised the price, leaving Finocchio unable to bargain. Noel reasoned that both Lloyd and Tanya possessed strong abilities and notable reputations. When the ultra-wealthy learned Finocchio had acquired them, they'd likely pay a fortune to buy them back, potentially up to $90 million. Compared to that, $11 million was a bargain. This forced Finocchio to reconsider, and he eventually agreed. Tanya desperately pleaded with Noel for mercy, but he remained unmoved. She then begged Walter, who couldn't help either, causing her to lash out at him in anger. Noel paid the man his promised fee and left. He knew he needed to become more ruthless to be the strongest and avoid being looked down upon. After returning, Walter decided to quit adventuring, shaken by recent events. Noel brought him a bottle of wine, hoping to persuade him to reform the team. However, Walter had already made up his mind to leave. Noel had no choice but to say goodbye. Now, with no team left, he had to start from scratch, determined to rebuild and continue pursuing his dream of becoming the strongest. Later, a mysterious girl saw Noel's recruitment letter and was delighted. A few days later, Noel was still waiting for someone to join his team when his friend Wolf showed up, doubting Noel could recruit anyone. As a result, Wolf invited Noel to join his team instead. Noel considered the offer but had one condition. He must be the team leader and also manage the team's funds. Hearing this, Wolf was stunned because being the leader was his only role in the team. Without it, he'd feel meaningless. However, Wolf's teammates agreed since Noel was intelligent, and they trusted him to handle the money. While they were arguing, someone approached Noel. She introduced herself as Alma. Noel conducted a serious interview and discovered her profession was a scout, precisely the role he needed. He asked why she became an adventurer, and Alma replied that she wasn't interested in adventuring. What intrigued her was Noel himself, because he was the grandson of the strongest adventurer. This surprised Noel, making him wonder if Alma had any connection to his grandfather. It turned out she was interested simply because her grandfather had once fought against Noel's grandfather. Noel thought Alma had come to take revenge on him, but that wasn't the case. She just wanted to learn more about the grandson of a legendary adventurer. When Noel asked for her grandfather's name, Alma revealed it. Shocking everyone, it was the leader of an assassin cult, a secret organization that would eliminate anyone for the right quest. Alma's grandfather was the first head of the cult and a legendary assassin. Hearing that she was the granddaughter of such a fearsome assassin, a large man stepped forward to pick a fight. Alma wanted to prove her strength, so she challenged him. She moved so quickly that the man couldn't react, receiving a single kick that knocked him out cold, leaving everyone astonished by her power. Noel immediately agreed to recruit Alma, but since she was hungry, he bought her a pastry. Noel still suspected Alma was lying about being the granddaughter of a legendary assassin, but Alma didn't care. She said she was interested in Noel because he had the eyes of someone willing to do anything to win. When Noel asked why she didn't join the assassin cult, Alma explained that it was too boring, her opponents were too weak, so she had no motivation to fight. When she was about to finish off an enemy, the cult leader, a high priest, stopped her. After observing her battle, he immediately expelled her from the cult. Despite acknowledging her strength, they found a reason to reject her. Alma also mentioned that although the cult was once independent, they now intended to become a puppet of the Empire. This shocked Noel because it meant the cult would be officially recognized by the government, and such an organization would only recruit assassins capable of fighting, not necessarily killing. Moving past that topic, the two went on an expedition. Along the way, Noel asked Alma about various enhancement spells she might know. They eventually reached a waterfall where Noel tasked Alma with catching a mutated rabbit. Creatures outside the abyss were often animals or plants mutated by its influence, less dangerous than abyss monsters, but still hazardous. Noel told Alma he would enhance her for the task, making her think it would be easy. However, Noel clarified that controlling enhanced power depended entirely on the recipient. Hearing that, Alma agreed to try Noel's enhancement spell. As soon as she was enhanced, she felt a surge of power coursing through her. She tested it by moving at incredible speed, and in no time, she had caught numerous rabbits, not just catching them, but knocking them all unconscious, which surprised Noel. Additionally, Alma mastered the enhancement ability faster than usual. With the mission complete, they set out to accept a new quest, which involved visiting a village Noel had been to before to exterminate monsters. It was Alma's first time riding a carriage, and she was delighted. Upon arrival, Alma was exhausted, so they looked for an inn. Unfortunately, all the inns were fully booked, leaving them with a single room that had only one bed. Noel offered the bed to Alma and planned to sleep on the floor, but Alma wanted to sleep beside him. Noel firmly refused and went to take a bath. When he came out, his muscular physique caught Alma's attention, making her admire the effort he must have put into training. Since he lacked innate talent, he had to work hard to become strong and compensate for his shortcomings. Moving on, Noel forced Alma to take a bath as well. That night, Noel reflected on Alma's words. Without natural strength, it would be challenging to become the strongest adventurer. He eventually fell asleep, but when he woke up, he found Alma clinging tightly to him. Despite struggling, he couldn't break free from her grip and was nearly suffocated. The next day, the village chief came to greet Noel's group. Since Noel had helped this village before, he returned with the same purpose. He explained that they were there to eliminate a band of bandits as per the quest. The chief invited them into his home to discuss the matter. Getting straight to the point, Noel learned that the bandits had recently attacked nearby villages, causing many casualties and abducting women, and they were now moving toward this village. After securing the down payment, Noel and Alma set out. Unexpectedly, the chief's daughter ran over to cheer them on, giving Noel a bamboo copter before leaving. Noel quickly located the bandits and identified their leader, who was a wanted criminal, an opportunity to claim an additional bounty. Alma used stealth to infiltrate their hideout, and once she confirmed the target, Noel ordered the bandits to halt. At that moment, Alma struck, piercing the leader from behind. The remaining bandits were swiftly dealt with. Alma took down most of them, while Noel shot the rest. Returning to the village to collect their reward, the chief tried to stall them by inviting them to dinner. They agreed and dined with the villagers. The chief's daughter admired Noel and aspired to become an adventurer like him. Noel advised her that becoming an adventurer required rigorous training and saving money to buy equipment and join a party when she came of age. She expressed her desire to join Noel's party someday. Observing her, Noel believed she could fulfill a support role, which delighted her. He agreed to let her join when she was old enough. Afterward, the village chief offered them some wine. Sensing something suspicious, Noel insisted the chief drink first. The chief froze, stunned by Noel's psychological manipulation. Noel deduced that the wine was poisoned, suspecting the chief planned to kill them to avoid paying the reward and steal their equipment. Exposed, the chief tried to deny it, but Noel's sharp reasoning left him defenseless. Even when the chief attempted to deflect, Noel ordered him to confess, forcing him to spill the truth. Enraged, Noel punched the chief, blinding him in one eye, and threatened to seize all his assets instead of the quest reward. The chief refused, so his daughter reluctantly handed over the money. As Noel and Alma departed, the girl's perception of Noel and the adventurer's life had changed. Although Noel felt a bit sad, this was how he dealt with wrongdoers. While traveling, they spotted an airship. Recognizing the emblem, Noel realized it belonged to a major clan officially recognized by the kingdom. In this land, there was an organization called Regalia, comprising the 7 most powerful clans. They weren't equal, their ranks were determined by strength and achievements. The top clans owned airships, and beyond their skills, they possessed top-tier equipment. Inspired, Noel set a new goal. Within a year, they would secure a spot in Regalia. In a flashback, Alma once asked a priest if she had passed the church's entrance exam. The priest said she was too strong but lacked certain qualifications, which led to her rejection. He also inquired if she was the one who had killed the great assassin. Alma unhesitatingly admitted it. The priest revealed he knew she wasn't the assassin's niece, but his daughter. Since childhood, she had fought her siblings, emerging as the strongest while the others perished, ensuring the best survived. The priest remarked that there was no place for someone like her in society anymore. In other words, Alma was rejected because she was too powerful. However, he advised her to seek out the grandson of the greatest adventurer, where she would find her purpose in life. Without hesitation, Alma ran to Noel, embracing him tightly, and vowed to fight by his side forever. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to a prison holding Hugo, the most dangerous criminal in the capital, a murderer who had caused widespread panic. Back with Noel, he was training in the morning, carrying a barrel of ice while running laps around the capital's walls. This was a routine he couldn't skip. His grandfather had designed these grueling exercises for him. From the moment Noel decided to become an adventurer, his grandfather stopped being gentle and trained him harshly. Yet Noel couldn't shake Alma's words that no matter how hard he trained, he could never surpass someone born with innate talent. Noel later met Alma again, and she was still fascinated by his body, so she pinned him down on the bed, asking for a kiss. Even though Noel refused, Alma insisted, forcing him to headbutt her to make her let go. On their way out, Alma complained that Noel was too heartless to reject someone like her. She then clung to his arm and asked about his plans for the day. Noel intended to visit the appraiser's clan. Appraisers were professionals who specialized in identification and couldn't level up, so they formed their own clan to study other professions. Although not a rare job, many adventurers needed their services, making the place quite bustling. Alma showed signs of being ready for a job promotion, indicated by a mark that signaled readiness to advance. However, she was unsure whether to become an assassin or a high-level scout. Noel, needing at least one more teammate, decided to wait until they found a new member before determining Alma's new job. Alma didn't seem thrilled about Noel's plan to recruit another teammate. The two left the Appraisers Guild and headed to a blacksmith to have their weapons and equipment maintained. The blacksmith, an acquaintance of Noel's, noticed Alma's impressive attack power. After leaving the forge, Noel and Alma went looking for skill books, specifically ones related to scouting techniques. Alma was curious why Noel wasn't looking for skills for himself, to which Noel explained that skill books for each profession were sold in different places, and he'd check elsewhere. He gave Alma $1 million to buy skills, strictly forbidding her from wasting it. However, Alma returned with a stuffed bear, leaving Noel speechless. She claimed she had bought an armor-piercing skill and used the leftover money to buy the bear to cuddle while sleeping, instead of cuddling Noel. Meanwhile, Noel had spent quite a bit on a skill that allowed him to purify the undead. Later, Noel spotted an acquaintance passing by and told Alma to wait while he approached Loki, a professional informant. Loki had been helping Noel investigate Hugo, the prisoner, because Noel wanted to recruit Hugo as a teammate and clear his name, believing he'd been framed. Loki thought Noel was crazy, first selling teammates as slaves, now trying to turn a death row inmate into an ally. Loki was a mimic, a rare profession that allowed him to disguise himself as anyone, making his true face unknown. Noel paid Loki to continue the investigation. Loki also warned Noel about a recent issue, the appearance of a dangerous drug that worked like an opioid, giving users an intense high but driving them insane. The family of Finocchio wouldn't tolerate whoever was distributing this substance, but ironically, the source was a branch of the Finocchio family itself. Noel recalled that the person managing this area was Albert, a dangerous figure leading a Finocchio branch. Meanwhile, Alma, annoyed with Noel, kept eating. She unexpectedly met someone from Wolf's group. Noel later learned that Albert's former superior had suddenly died, allowing Albert to seize power. As Noel walked past an Eastern man, he assumed the man was a beggar and offered him some money. However, the man called Noel back and returned the coin. Noel refused to take back money touched by a beggar, insisting the man keep it. When the man approached again, Noel kicked him away, declaring he wasn't even worth the coin. Refusing to be insulted, the man prepared to fight. Noel realized he wasn't a novice, astonished by the man's speed, forcing Noel to retreat and throw him aside. But the man stood up, determined to fight seriously, warning Noel not to be careless if he didn't want to die. Noel realized he had struck gold. This man was the teammate he'd been searching for. Noel drew his dagger to confront him, but the man was suddenly stopped by another person, who turned out to be his master. The swordsman's name was Koga, and his master had punished him with this ring. Noel recognized it as a contract ring, commonly used in slave contracts and banned from being used on humans. Meanwhile, the girl from the Wolf group had heard about Alma's situation and thought Noel's sudden departure might be because he had found a new member. Noel then kicked the slave master and interrogated him about Koga. The man revealed that he used to run an underground arena for a major southern family, but after being caught embezzling betting money, he had to flee and took Koga with him since he had personally trained him. Now, he planned to use Koga to rebuild his operations. Seeing Noel's knowledge, he assumed Noel was part of the underworld, but unfortunately, he wasn't. Alma still believed that Noel was all she needed, and if he brought someone new, she would kill that person. Noel thought that if he killed the slave master, he could take Koga without worrying about being wanted, as the man was already a fugitive. However, he gave up on that idea, thinking that if Koga had real skills, he would have already killed his master and regained his freedom. Therefore, Noel didn't need a dog, he needed a wolf. Returning home, Noel found Lisha from the Wolf group again. She came to freeload and wanted Noel to treat her. He intended to refuse, but Alma seemed upset about him leaving her behind, so he reluctantly agreed to buy Lisha a meal. He then asked if she had heard anything about the recent toxic drug incident. She'd only heard rumors, so Noel wanted her to warn the Wolf group. She found it strange that Noel cared about her guild, but he claimed it was just an exchange of information between colleagues. Afterward, Lisha left, deciding from now on to be Alma's best friend. Meanwhile, the slave master was found by Albert. He couldn't believe he'd fallen into the hands of such a madman. Fearing Albert would send him back to his former master, Albert claimed he had a better idea to turn him into a living doll and return him. The slave master thought Albert was joking, but he was completely serious. Koga, who had been ready to give up on life, was suddenly faced with Albert's men bringing in the village chief, who came to repay his debt to Albert. However, his money had been taken by Noel. The village chief told Albert about Noel and even falsely accused him of slandering Albert's family. He also claimed he had to give money to Noel because Noel held his wife and children hostage. Albert decided to take revenge on Noel, but would still punish the village chief for not repaying the debt. Thus, he decided to take one of the chief's arms. Albert wanted Koga to cut it off using the very staff in his hand. Before the performance, Albert took a drug to heighten his excitement. The village chief didn't believe the staff could cut, but Koga swiftly swung it, severing the chief's arm. Albert laughed maniacally at the man's screams. Albert decided to keep the slave master under the condition that he transferred Koga's ownership to him. Koga was then taken to change and equip armor. Koga had always been unwanted. His father was a merchant, and his mother was a beautiful woman. They prayed to the gods for a child, but shortly after, the couple was attacked by bandits on their way home, and it seemed Koga's mother was assaulted. Not long after, Koga was born, but his father never considered him his son. His mother, overwhelmed by grief, took her own life. Koga grew up facing his father's neglect and the servants' contempt, seen as a cursed child no one wanted. Eventually, Koga realized he had been sold into slavery, where he met the slave master who trained him. Soon after, Koga won his first fight and received praise from the master, the first time he felt needed. But he soon realized that, in the end, he was still just a slave. Now fully armored and equipped, Koga was ready. That evening, Noel was summoned by Loki to a secluded place for information. He informed Noel that Albert's family had taken notice of him. Albert was a true madman and the illegitimate child of the previous leader. Suddenly, Noel sensed the presence of an armed individual approaching. Realizing Loki had betrayed him, Loki admitted that Albert's side had paid him a hefty sum, making it impossible to refuse. However, Noel pointed out that Loki probably hadn't considered the possibility of being dealt with right there. Despite this, Noel decided not to take action, declaring that he would crush Albert's entire family instead. Loki, realizing he had lost the pride of an information broker, felt grateful for Noel's decision and promised to repay him in the future. Noel then took a drug to boost his combat abilities for 10 minutes, though his body would suffer consequences afterward. Unexpectedly, Noel encountered Koga, who was surprised to find his acquaintance as his current target. Noel assumed Koga had turned his life around and advanced to become the bodyguard of someone powerful, prompting him to fight Koga with full force. However, Koga still felt indebted to Noel for a single silver coin, but he couldn't disobey his master's orders. Thus, he decided to reveal his abilities to fight Noel fairly. Noel responded by disclosing his own powers and background. Koga suddenly charged and knocked Noel away, but Noel shot a grappling hook, swung upward, and fired fire elemental magic bullets. Koga slashed around to create a vacuum that extinguished the flames. Chasing after Noel, Koga forced him to aim at his groin, making Koga think Noel was playing dirty and retreat. However, Noel argued that in a life or death battle, any underhanded tactic was acceptable. Noel then threw a flash bomb and charged at Koga, but Koga created multiple slashes, sending them flying to repel Noel. He then attacked Noel from behind, forcing Noel to use a stunning skill to stop Koga. Unexpectedly, Koga was immune to the move and unleashed an attack that destroyed Noel's footing, causing him to fall. Koga pointed his sword at Noel's face, and Noel asked why he didn't finish him off. Koga hesitated, so Noel grabbed the sword, stating that Koga shouldn't show mercy to an enemy, but should prioritize himself. Koga didn't understand why Noel would give such advice. At that moment, Alma arrived, claiming that she was the only one allowed to touch Noel. Previously, when Noel took the drug, he had used magic to send a distress signal to Alma. Alma charged at Koga, who tried to persuade her to stop, saying he didn't want to fight a girl, and that he was far superior to her in skill. Alma found Koga arrogant and moved at extreme speed to attack. Koga closed his eyes and created a barrier that allowed him to sense everything within. Noel realized the vast gap between effort and innate talent, acknowledging that Koga was far superior to him. Thus, he decided to become the strongest by leading other strong individuals. Koga and Alma prepared to unleash their ultimate moves to end the battle quickly. But Noel fired a flare to stop them, asking Alma to leave. He also advised Koga to leave and pass a message to Albert for him. Upon returning, Koga received the head of the slave master as punishment for his failure. Koga relayed Noel's message, challenging Albert to come find him if he wasn't afraid. Albert was furious and ordered his subordinates to find Noel immediately. As Koga left, Albert's bodyguard, Rios, noted that Koga had said something he shouldn't have. Rios asked if Koga wanted revenge for his former master, but Koga refused, as he never liked his former master. However, Noel was different. His eyes emitted a light that impressed Koga, for despite having the weakest profession, Noel possessed the mindset to become the strongest. Rios remarked that admiring an opponent was normal since he had experienced the same feeling before. Albert then led his men to find Noel at a tavern, mocking both him and the adventurer profession. Noel retorted, calling Albert an uneducated, ill-mannered fool. Enraged, Albert tried to draw his knife, but the burly man from before stopped him, stating that this place was for adventurers only. He didn't care about Albert's business with Noel, but causing trouble here was not allowed. Albert ordered Rios to wipe out all the adventurers present, but Rios warned him that if they caused a commotion, Finocchio would take notice and soon uncover their involvement with the drug operation, spelling doom for them all. Still, if Albert had the guts, Rios was ready to follow through. Taking advantage of the moment, Noel insulted Albert further and revealed that the drink Albert had just consumed was poisoned. Shocked, Albert questioned how Noel knew he'd show up, but Noel smugly replied that he simply poisoned the drink on the off chance Albert might come, and even if he didn't, Noel would lose nothing. Convinced he was poisoned, Albert fled in panic, while Rios, realizing Noel had tricked him, paid for the drink and took it away. He advised Noel to leave before Albert returned. Noel decided to leave with Alma, and the burly man thought that was the extent of Noel's courage. However, Noel and Alma had their own plans. They left the capital for a week before returning as intended. Upon their return, Albert confronted them, immediately ordering Rios's group to deal with Noel and keep him alive for torture. Surprisingly, Rios's team refused, having grown tired of following Albert's insane orders. They had joined out of respect for the former leader, not to become bullies. One tattooed man expressed his disappointment at having been forced to harm the former leader's daughter. Despite his fury, Noel calmly spoke to them, having noticed the pinwheel emblem. He revealed that Albert wasn't the previous leader's son. Noel had obtained his birth certificate as proof. The former leader likely knew this, but turned a blind eye for the sake of his lover, Albert's mother. Additionally, Noel uncovered that Albert had deliberately poisoned the former leader, having extracted this secret from the doctor who treated him using his own abilities. Rios demanded to hear the truth from Albert himself, but still offered him a chance. If Albert could defeat Noel in a duel, they would continue to follow his orders. Albert could even choose someone to fight in his place. Albert refused, forcing Finocchio to step in as the duel's overseer. Noel had intentionally involved Finocchio, knowing he wanted to crush Albert's drug network, and Noel would be rewarded if he won. When Albert still refused, Finocchio berated him, stating he wouldn't waste his time attending without reason. If Albert wanted to remain a branch leader, he'd better shut up and fight. Reluctantly, Albert summoned Koga to battle, just as Noel had predicted, knowing Koga was bound to Albert by a contract and couldn't betray him. Contrary to Alma's expectations, Noel stepped up to fight Koga himself. He exchanged a few words with Koga, noting this was their third confrontation. Koga quickly realized Noel must have some plan. Suddenly, Noel fired a shot, which Koga slashed apart, creating an icy zone around them. No one outside could see what was happening. Albert remained confident that Noel couldn't defeat Koga. Inside, Noel noticed Koga preparing for a lightning-fast strike that could kill him instantly if he was careless. However, Noel had planned to turn the tables from the start, so he wasn't worried. He unexpectedly tossed his gun aside, claiming it was out of ammo, and drew a dagger. After muttering something nonsensical to distract Koga, he suddenly lunged forward. Koga instinctively drew his sword to block, but Noel used his own hand to parry the strike and knocked the sword away. Koga quickly pushed Noel back to dash towards his sword, unleashing a strike to shatter the ice before charging at Noel. However, Koga ended up slashing into one of Noel's magic bullets, which instantly froze his body in place. Noel then rushed in and delivered a decisive kick. Koga couldn't believe that Noel had planned everything from the very beginning. Since childhood, Koga had always seen himself as a harbinger of misfortune, someone nobody needed, with nothing to hope for. He had always considered himself weak. Even after becoming a swordsman and going through countless battles, he still saw himself as weak but in spirit. Noel, on the other hand, was the complete opposite. Despite having the weakest class and no innate talent, Noel possessed the spirit of a true strongman, along with a confident gaze. Koga wished he could have that same strength from Noel to change himself. After the fight, Noel decided to leave the rest to Finocchio. Rios praised Noel, saying they owed him a debt, but Noel didn't accept the favor. Rios now understood why Koga admired Noel. Later, Alma bandaged Noel's hand, saying that it was her duty to fight while Noel was the commander, and he shouldn't take on his teammates' roles like that. If there was anything he needed, he could rely on her like an older sister, but Noel had no intention of seeing Alma as an older sister at all. Finocchio then approached to discuss a few matters with Noel. Finocchio was quite pleased that Noel had helped him eliminate a festering problem within the family. Alma stepped outside to let the two talk, and Finocchio invited Noel to join his family, offering him control over Albert's former branch. However, Noel declined because he had no interest in serving under someone else. Finocchio then used his own ability to take Noel's heart. This was a technique that allowed Finocchio to steal the heart of someone who had rejected him twice. If Finocchio moved more than 5 meters away from Noel or crushed the heart himself, Noel would die. Finocchio claimed that Noel had proven himself too dangerous and a potential threat to his family. However, Noel showed no fear, stepping forward and asserting that Finocchio was the one who was truly afraid. Indeed, Noel would rise to the top one day, and killing a threat like him was the logical thing to do. But after doing so, would Finocchio's pride remain intact, having killed such a formidable opponent in such a cowardly way? Finocchio hadn't expected to be the one intimidated instead, so he burst into laughter and returned Noel's heart, even apologizing for scaring him. Finocchio bluntly stated that if Noel had the opportunity but still couldn't reach the top, he shouldn't blame Finocchio for being ruthless. Of course, Noel wouldn't disappoint him. As Finocchio was leaving, Albert rushed over, kneeling and begging for mercy. Finocchio promised not to kill him, but instead, he would cut off Albert's limbs and throw him into a pigsty to keep company with Finocchio's pets. The next morning, Noel revealed that he had obtained Koga's slave contract. However, he didn't need a weak dog by his side. He needed a fierce wolf. Thus, he returned the contract to Koga, letting him do whatever he pleased because he was now officially free. Koga asked Noel what his goal was, and Noel remained steadfast in his ambition to climb to the top of everything. Koga had never truly experienced freedom before, so he didn't know what to do with it. However, he wanted to witness the moment Noel reached the top, so if his role was to become a wolf, then that was the path he would follow. Noel understood Koga's desire and extended his hand to invite Koga to join his team. A few days later, the three of them conquered a high-level abyss. Alma charged ahead to deal with long-range monsters while casting armor-piercing spells on the tank-type creatures in front, allowing Koga to swoop in and finish them off. The regular mobs were handled by Noel and his gun. In the end, whoever was quickest got to land the final blow on the boss. However, after the battle, Alma and Koga got into an argument, quarreling over who landed the finishing blow on the boss. Noel had to step in to stop them from fighting, stating that Alma was not allowed to act on her own anymore, and that the achievements belonged to the entire team, not just individuals, so there was no need to fight over them. Noel then stated that they were now strong enough to establish their own clan. With a clan, he wouldn't have to take on transfer quests like these anymore and could keep all the money. Koga noticed something appearing on Noel's hand and quickly realized that he was now able to level up. From this moment on, Noel would lead the strongest teammates and create the most powerful clan to climb to the top of Regalia. A few days later, Harold, the overseer of adventurers, came to meet Noel. He noted that Noel's family was still running smoothly, to which Noel replied that it was thanks to the efforts of the household staff and that he planned to hand over all management tasks to them. What mattered to him was why an adventurer overseer had come to see him. Harold revealed a recently taken photo of a Lord-class monster that had appeared in Noel's hometown. Noel suspected that the creature that had killed his grandfather was still alive because when he found his grandfather's body, neither his weapon nor the monster's corpse was anywhere to be found. Noel asked Harold if anyone had managed to defeat that Lord-class monster, and Harold replied that a pioneering party had confronted it but suffered a disastrous defeat. When a clan called the Tyrant Dragon Guild arrived, the monster fled. They had always believed that monsters invaded the world out of instinct, but this Lord-class monster seemed to act with reason. If it wasn't eliminated soon, it would ascend to the highest level, an extinction god. 40 years ago, an extinction god appeared and wiped out 3 countries in the blink of an eye, but Noel's grandfather's clan managed to drive it away. Now, the same disaster could occur again. Noel was intrigued, which made Harold notice how much he resembled his grandfather. Harold had originally come to visit Noel because he was an old friend of his grandfather, but it seemed he had worried unnecessarily since Noel was doing well and was strong. He also knew that Noel would be old enough to establish his own clan next week. Noel requested that Harold remember his face because he would soon become the top adventurer. Not long after, Noel's group went to meet Harold to apply for clan registration. The moment Harold entered, all 3 of them were startled and on guard, but he told them to relax as it had been a while since he last saw Noel. After reviewing Noel's clan application, Harold saw that everything was in order: the clan name, member levels, and deposit. However, he still had to refuse their request. Meanwhile, Sieg, the vice-captain of the Tyrant Dragon Guild and the top adventurer of the capital, had just dealt with a high-level monster. Koga didn't understand why they had been rejected, so Harold explained that current circumstances required him to select high-ranking adventurers as an additional criterion for clan establishment. Without meeting this additional criterion, they couldn't form a clan. Noel wanted to hear about the situation that led to this new requirement, and Harold asked them to keep it confidential. They had discovered that the underground mana flow was suddenly intensifying. Its eruption was only a matter of time, and when it happened, extinction-class monsters from the void would flood into the world. They couldn't forcibly control the mana flow, either because any mistake could trigger a series of natural disasters that would lead to humanity's extinction. With time running out and even the guilds in Regalia unable to handle the situation alone despite joining forces, Harold and the capital were focusing on nurturing clans with strong potential to develop quickly. There wasn't enough time or resources to raise new recruits like them. Noel understood and decided to leave, admitting that Harold was right. On the way back, Koga wondered if Noel was giving up, but Noel had never intended to do so. He was merely withdrawing their application temporarily to seek more power. He admitted that the impending catastrophe might be a bad omen, but it was also an opportunity for them to make a giant leap forward. Thanks to the resources gathered from high-level monsters, they could thrive, and adventurers could rise in fame. And now, if Noel could establish a clan under the current circumstances, he would quickly make its name known far and wide. Within half a year, he planned to bring his clan into Regalia, and once he secured the opportunity to command the battle against the extinction god, he would defeat it and rise above all. They now needed something to shorten the time required, and right after that, the answer appeared for Noel. It was the news that the Tyrant Dragon Squad had just defeated a high-level monster. He needed hot, sensational news like this to boost his reputation. Noel then went to the appraisal guild to upgrade his class to tactician. Thanks to this upgrade, he could think at high speed and analyze strategies to make the most accurate predictions. On his way back, Noel discovered that Sieg, the vice captain of the Tyrant Dragon Squad, had returned. Surrounded by girls, Sieg unexpectedly noticed Noel. He knew Noel was the one who had taken down Albert's family and was also the grandson of a legendary adventurer. Noel knew full well that Sieg was trying to recruit him into the Tyrant Dragon Squad, but of course, he refused. He claimed he would only serve the strongest, and Sieg was not the strongest yet because people still regarded him as equal to the leader of the 100 Demons Night Parade Guild. Naturally, with Sieg's pride, he couldn't accept being considered inferior to anyone. But he also realized that Noel was deliberately provoking him. If Sieg and the leader of the 100 Demons Night Parade Guild fought, one of them would surely die. Noel then left, while someone referred to Sieg as the second strongest adventurer, which infuriated him. When Sieg questioned them, they explained that it was because the leader of the 100 Demons Night Parade Guild had soloed more high-level monsters. Noel noticed that being called second best exposed Sieg's weakness. He also knew he needed to establish a clan soon before trouble found him. Meanwhile, Alma was sparring with Leisha. After a while, Leisha realized that Alma wasn't suited for a rear support role. She was too hot-tempered and didn't pay enough attention to her surroundings. Leisha believed that the rear line was for people who could observe the battlefield, like Noel. If Alma felt she was better suited for an assassin role, she should choose it, and Noel would find a way to utilize her. At that moment, another person arrived, Ophelia, Leisha's childhood friend and an archer from another party called the Celestial Wing Knights. Ophelia introduced her team, the spear wielder Kaim, the burly man Vla, and their captain Leon, who considered himself more of a figurehead than a true leader. Ophelia told Alma to reach out if she needed support, as she had recently heard a rumor about someone named Noel. The rumor claimed that Noel had betrayed his teammates and dealt with the underworld, implying that his companions were also scum. Leon urged Ophelia not to judge others based on rumors. After their group left, Leisha apologized to Alma for what was said, but Alma wasn't upset Ophelia was right in her own way. Meanwhile, Noel met with Loki to gather information about B-rank adventurers on par with him. In this shady business, it seemed that people with saintly faces easily attracted attention and were well liked. Noel's target was Leon because, according to Loki, no one at B-rank was stronger than him. Noel believed that no one was without weaknesses, not even top-tier adventurers like Sieg. The moment you struck a person's weakness, their smile would vanish. Noel would stop at nothing to climb to the top, even if it meant resorting to the most ruthless methods. A few days later, Noel visited Hugo in prison. Hugo knew Noel was trying to clear his name to recruit him, but he thought it would never happen. Hugo had a unique ability that blended combat and production classes. People had once called him a genius. His combined class was Puppet Knight, allowing him to create and control puppets, complemented by his calm demeanor and sharp mind. Hugo had once achieved many victories as a freelance adventurer, but he had no teammates and soon retired to become an artisan. However, an incident occurred, and Hugo was thrown into prison. Noel revealed that he had already prepared everything to secure Hugo's release since most of the prison guards followed his orders. Hugo claimed that even if he were released, he wouldn't join Noel because he despised adventurers, seeing them as arrogant and overly reliant on their own strength. Despite this, Noel remained determined to recruit Hugo and left, while Hugo found Noel somewhat intriguing. That night, Noel and his team went to a bar frequented by B-rank adventurers. As soon as they entered, a burly man noticed Noel and approached to mock him. Noel bluntly retorted, revealing that he knew all the secrets about the man's family, warning him to be prepared to lose everything if he wanted to pick a fight. The man, now frightened, backed off, and Noel confidently headed to the counter to order food. Noel then noticed the person he needed to meet that night. Members of the Celestial Wing Knights had arrived, and Ophelia quickly recognized Alma. When Noel asked if Alma knew her, Alma mentioned that Ophelia had some negative views about Noel. Conveniently, Noel was looking to stir trouble, so he introduced himself to Ophelia, who was shocked that he was the so-called traitor from the rumors. Noel remarked that those two comrades were quite valuable, making the phrase, "precious comrades," fitting for them. Koga intervened, advising Ophelia not to start a fight with Noel. Ophelia thought Koga looked like a dog wagging its tail for its master, but Koga ignored the insult and warned her to choose her words more carefully next time unless she wanted to face his blade. Leon then approached to see what was going on and learned about the verbal clash between Ophelia and Noel. Leon humbled himself to apologize to Noel, but Noel suggested that Leon should keep his dog on a tighter leash to prevent it from biting people. Offended by the remark about his teammate, Leon demanded Noel retract his words, but Ophelia didn't want Leon to get involved with Noel, believing all the nasty rumors about him were true. Noel continued to mock Leon's group, making Leon see him as despicable and unworthy of being an adventurer. However, Noel didn't need Leon's acknowledgement to be one. Did Leon expect everyone to be as righteous as he was? Leon believed that Noel would face the consequences one day, but Noel thought Leon was so self-righteous that he considered himself a saint. Enraged, Leon stormed out, while Koga felt Noel had gone too far. Noel then revealed his true plan, shocking both Koga and Lycia, who exclaimed that Noel was playing dirty. But Noel believed that in this world, the arrogant would always pay the price. Meanwhile, Harold made a bet with his granddaughter, claiming that Noel would be the one to command the upcoming battle against the Extinction God. His granddaughter bet on the leader of the 100 Demons Night Parade. Whoever won would earn the position of family head. At the same time, Kaim, the spear-wielding member of Leon's team, reminisced about the past. Leon's kindness had often made him a target for bullies, and Kaim always had to step in, urging Leon to fight back since he had a combat-related class. Kaim later dreamed of becoming an adventurer and invited Leon to join him. Tired of being stuck in one place, Kaim wanted to see the world, but Leon lacked confidence, feeling he wasn't as strong as Kaim. Eventually, Kaim convinced him, and not long after, their party was formed. Thanks to Kaim's recklessness and Leon's strength, their team had come this far, and at some point, they had become known as the Celestial Wing Knights. Later, Kaim and Leon sat at the bar to discuss things, and Leon admitted he'd been quite hot-headed that day. Kaim thought Leon was jealous of Noel because Noel, despite being new to the profession, had quickly reached milestones that had taken them years to achieve. Leon decided to cast aside his jealousy and focus on forming a clan with his team, as they had received a letter requesting them to establish one a few days prior. This meeting was originally intended to discuss the clan registration, but unexpected events occurred. Kaim mentioned that the entire team had agreed to follow Leon's decisions, so the next day, both of them went to meet Harold to register, only to be rejected again. Harold told them the same thing he had once told Noel when rejecting his application, that they had missed their chance to register early when it was still possible, and now the opportunity to form a clan was gone. However, Leon bowed his head, pleading for one more chance. Harold agreed on the condition that they defeat a monster he designated. There would be another team competing for this clan registration spot, none other than Noel's group. Harold then explained the monster they needed to defeat a level 8 boss capable of reading human minds. It resembled a monkey with 3 eyes, known for its cunning and brutality. In the past, many had failed to defeat it, suffering mental torment until death. After explaining, Harold urged both teams to eliminate it quickly and set a rule forbidding them from sabotaging each other through violence, as he would be watching them with his powers. Still concerned, Noel requested an additional rule that all members of both teams must be in their best condition before the test to prevent anyone from being severely injured beforehand. Harold also announced the penalty. The losing team must disband and could no longer operate with its current members. On the day of the trial, both teams arrived and quickly ventured inside. However, instead of engaging in battle, Noel's group stayed outside, casually eating as if nothing was happening. Noel claimed they were simply recharging before the fight, which disappointed Leon, seeing him as disgraceful. Once inside, Vla openly revealed that Noel had approached him a few days earlier, attempting to persuade him to betray Leon. Vla refused but suspected Noel had done the same with others. Indeed, 2 other members excluding Leon had also been tempted but rejected Noel's offer, as they were determined to support Leon. Koga grew worried that Leon's team might actually win, but Noel had already anticipated everything. He knew that Leon was the team's only standout member, the one carrying them this far. However, Leon's personality would ultimately be the obstacle preventing both him and the team from achieving victory. Moreover, Noel had already planted the seeds of betrayal within their team, ensuring their eventual collapse. A few days earlier, Noel had met with Kaim, suggesting he leave Leon behind because their team was distorted and overly dependent on Leon. Noel claimed Kaim would find freedom without Leon, as deep down, Kaim must know that Leon would eventually surpass him. No amount of effort could outmatch natural talent. Yet, Kaim still wanted to support Leon. Noel warned that if Kaim didn't betray Leon, then Leon would eventually betray him first. Meanwhile, Leon's team encountered the boss but kept failing to land attacks because the monster could read their minds, preventing any surprise assaults. Noel believed it was only a matter of time before Leon's teammates realized their limits. The boss launched a barrage of rocks, injuring Ophelia. Leon shielded her, allowing the others to carry her to safety. Provoked by the boss's taunts, Leon had to fend it off and throw it aside to escape. Knowing it was time, Noel decided to join the battle. Kaim suggested using himself as bait to help Leon unleash his strongest move against the monster. But Leon argued the monster would see through that, making the plan fail. Instead, Leon proposed an alliance with Noel, believing that even if they lost, at least they could prevent the team from disbanding. The team was shocked that Leon would betray them, just as Noel had predicted. Kaim couldn't believe Leon trusted an enemy over his own teammates. Leon insisted it was the only way to ensure no one died, but Kaim, unable to contain his emotions, stabbed Leon in fury over this betrayal. Kaim had always been jealous of Leon but suppressed it, hoping they could rise together. However, he could no longer hold back and now craved his own freedom. At this moment, Noel arrived, and the boss also located Leon's group, but it ignored them to play with Noel. The boss was amused and called him a new toy, but Noel simply called Koga to step forward and launched a swift attack that the boss couldn't anticipate. Noel's thoughts were operating at such a high speed that the boss couldn't read them. The boss was continuously assaulted by Koga, while Noel's mental presence created a distracting noise. Eventually, after losing an arm, the boss discarded its third eye and charged at Noel. But right then, Alma emerged to deliver the finishing blow. She used a new skill from her assassin class, piercing a hole through the boss's body and killing it. Kaim then confronted Noel, accusing him of orchestrating everything that led to this situation. Noel didn't deny it. Instead, he claimed that part of the blame lay with them. They all secretly desired freedom from Leon because, compared to Leon, neither of them was a true genius. They were replaceable as long as Leon remained the team's core. Jealousy was the very thing that caused their team to fall apart. More importantly, Leon himself had betrayed his team's trust, which led to this outcome. Harold then declared Noel's team the winners, and Leon's team was officially disbanded. A few days later, news of the dissolution of the Heavenly Wing Knight Order spread. Ophelia decided to return to her village to rest. Vla found a new place to settle, and Noel sought out Hugo. Hugo was surprised that Noel had pushed Leon's team to ruin just to grant them freedom. Noel argued that they were already too distorted, and he had only helped them realize it. He also hadn't given up on trying to get Hugo out of there. Meanwhile, Kaim drowned his sorrows in alcohol. The bar owner advised him to start over. Although Kaim's actions were irreversible, there was still something he needed to do to return freedom to Leon. At that moment, Leon was still imprisoned by the guilt of not trusting his comrades. Kime's role was to free Leon from that prison so he could soar again on his own wings. While this was happening, Leon was being harassed at a bar by a burly thug with a sharp nose, who had always been irritated by Leon's righteous morals. Just as the thug was beating Leon, Noel arrived and ordered him to back off. The thug made the mistake of challenging Noel, who swiftly drew a knife, slicing off the tip of his nose and threatening to harm his family if he didn't know his place. Afterward, Noel asked Leon to join his team, offering him the position of vice leader of the clan. Leon refused, but Noel insisted that he should let go of the past and look toward the future. Leon, however, didn't want to forget the memories he had with his former comrades, even knowing that staying with them held no future. Noel argued that Leon should be selfish and move forward, so that one day his name and the name of the Heavenly Wing Knight Order would be remembered by the world alongside him. When Leon asked what Noel's ultimate goal was, Noel replied that he aimed for the position of the one who stands above all. Hearing this, Leon decided to follow Noel on this path. A few days later, Harold assigned Noel's group a new mission: to eliminate a newly appeared level 9 monster. Noel and Leon walked through the streets together, overhearing rumors about Leon's betrayal of his former teammates. Noel told Leon to ignore them, but Kime suddenly appeared, intent on settling the score with Noel. Leon stepped in to block him, becoming Kime's new target. Eventually, Leon knocked Kime out with a punch, exactly what Kime wanted. He wanted Leon to sever ties with his old team completely and move forward without looking back. Later, Noel led his team to the place he planned to use as the clan's headquarters. It was an old execution ground, rumored to have strange phenomena. Anticipating this, Noel had already purchased a purification spell for undead, which would also aid them in defeating the upcoming level 9 boss. They soon faced a giant wolf capable of summoning undead soldiers. The wolf continuously summoned minions to wear down Noel's team. Noel instructed Leon to unleash his strongest attack to force the boss to reveal itself and chase them. Noel lured the wolf into a cave, where it finally spoke, demanding they become its next meal. However, Noel proposed a deal. If the wolf stopped attacking them now, he would give it an important piece of information. Noel then took out a spray bottle, revealing that it contained a colorless, odorless poison specially crafted by Alma. He had strategically placed these bottles around the cave, luring the wolf inside to inhale the toxin. The boss was stunned by Noel's ability to calculate the exact level of injury and exhaustion his team could endure just to make it lower its guard and give chase. The boss soon collapsed, unable to summon any more minions, and Noel calmly shot it in the head, finishing it off effortlessly. Harold acknowledged that the team had successfully defeated another boss. Noel remained determined to climb to the rank of Regalia within the next 6 months, boldly asking Harold to keep a close eye on him. Harold couldn't help but notice how much Noel resembled his grandfather from the past. With that, the story came to an end,